Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
The training chamber aboard Orbital Academy Station. Kepri did not simply simulate gravity. It weaponized it. A low, constant hum vibrated through metallic walls, the sound of generators bending space-time just enough to make every movement heavier, slower, more deliberate. The floor plating groaned faintly under the strain, reinforced alloys resisting forces that would have crushed standard materials. Above the central platform, a digital readout flickered. Gravity, 3.7 standard. For most species present, that was already beyond comfortable. For some, it bordered on punishing. The cadets stood in a loose semicircle, their postures betraying varying degrees of confidence and concern. This was not their first physical trial, but something about today felt different. At the center of the chamber sat the object, the core weight, a perfect matte black cube, its surface absorbing nearly all light, edges so precise they seemed artificial even by advanced manufacturing standards. No handles, no grips, no visible seams, just mass compressed, contained absolute. Instructor Threx stood beside it, towering and rigid, exoskeletal plates clicking softly as they shifted. His voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "Today's evaluation is straightforward," he said. "You will lift the core weight." A pause. Individually. A ripple of unease passed through the group. The weight has been calibrated to challenge all known species within acceptable performance thresholds. Threx continued. "Failure is expected. Effort is required." That did not reassure anyone. At the far edge of the formation stood Elias Ward. He adjusted his stance slightly, feeling the artificial gravity pressing down through his boots, into his legs, his spine. It was heavy, but not unbearable, more like wearing a weighted vest. Everywhere he'd felt worse. Still, he kept that to himself. "Cadet Viral," Threx called. The Virelian stepped forward, tall, four-armed, with sleek musculature designed for precision and speed rather than brute force. Their large, reflective eyes locked onto the cube. They circled it once, analyzing. Smart, Elias thought. Two upper arms reached down first, testing the surface. No give, no texture. The Virelian adjusted, positioning all four arms beneath opposing edges, bracing their legs. A deep breath. Then they lifted, or tried to. Muscles tensed. Limbs trembled. The cube shifted. Just barely. One corner scraping against the floor with a sharp metallic screech. Encouragement murmured from the other cadets. "Come on. You've got it." The Virelian strained harder, a faint clicking sound escaping them. Somewhere between effort and pain. The cube rose a centimeter, then dropped. Hard. The impact echoed through the chamber. The Virelian staggered back, limbs shaking uncontrollably. Attempt recorded. Threx said flatly. Next. Cadet after cadet stepped forward. A dense-bodied Krask approached with visible confidence. Their species was known for surviving crushing atmospheric pressures. If anyone could brute force this, it would be them. They didn't hesitate. They bent, gripped the cube from beneath, and with a guttural roar, lifted it, a full 10 centimeters off the ground. The chamber reacted instantly, some in awe, others in disbelief. But the moment didn't last. The Krask's arms buckled, the cube slammed back down, and the cadet dropped to one knee, breathing heavily. Still, it was the best attempt so far. Noted, Threx said. Elias watched carefully. He wasn't focused on the strength. He was watching how they moved. Everyone was treating it like a test of force, like the goal was to overpower the weight. But the way they braced, the way they distributed tension, it all looked inefficient, too rigid, too desperate. He shifted his own stance unconsciously, adjusting his footing as if preparing for something he hadn't yet decided to do. More cadets tried. Some barely budged a cube. Others managed small lifts, seconds at most, before losing control. Each attempt chipped away at the room's confidence. By the time Threx called the next name, the silence had thickened. Cadet Ward. Elias blinked. A few heads turned immediately. The human, of course. There was always curiosity surrounding him, but not expectation. If anything, most assumed he would perform below average. Humans weren't known across the galaxy for exceptional physical strength, adaptability, maybe endurance, occasionally. But this was something else. Elias stepped forward, feeling dozens of eyes tracking him. Don't overthink it. The gravity pressed down harder as he entered the central platform, slightly increased within the test zone. Okay, that's noticeable. He rolled his shoulders once, loosening up. The cube sat in front of him, silent and absolute. Up close, it felt heavier than it looked. Not just physically, mentally, like it demanded effort before you even touched it. He crouched slightly, studying it. No handles, no grip. Fine. He glanced briefly at the floor, then adjusted his footing. One foot slightly back, knees bent, back straight. A deadlift stance. Familiar, comforting. Behind him, a cadet whispered, "He's only using one arm?" Elias hadn't even realized he'd reached down with just his right hand. He paused. He could switch to both. Probably should. But something in his mind, some instinct, said, try it just once. He wrapped his fingers under the cube's edge. It didn't move. Not yet. He inhaled slowly, then pulled. At first, nothing happened. Then, the cube lifted. Cleanly. No scraping. No wobble. Just a smooth, controlled rise off the ground. With one hand. The chamber froze. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the hum of the gravity generators seemed to fade into the background. Elias held the cube at his side, arms slightly bent, stabilizing the weight more out of instinct than effort. It was heavy, definitely heavy, but not impossible, not even close. He looked up. Everyone was staring at him, wide-eyed, motionless. Instructor Threx's mandibles were slightly open, a subtle gesture, but unmistakable. Shock. Elias frowned. Did I do it wrong? No one answered. Somewhere in the back, a cadet dropped something. The sound snapped the room back to life. That is not. One cadet started. Impossible, another muttered. Threx stepped forward slowly, each movement deliberate. Cadet Ward, the instructor said, voice quieter now but far more intense. Set the weight down. Elias did so carefully, lowering the cube without letting it slam. It touched the ground with a controlled, almost gentle thud. Silence followed. Threx circled the cube once, then looked back at Elias. State your species designation. Elias blinked. Human. A long pause. Then Threx turned to the rest of the cadets. The trial will continue. But the tone had changed. Everything had changed. Because now, the question wasn't how heavy the cube was. It was, what else had they underestimated? News did not travel slowly on Orbital Academy Station Kepri. It detonated. By the time the cadets were dismissed from the gravity chamber, the story had already fractured into a dozen exaggerated versions. The human lifted it effortlessly. No, he didn't even strain. I heard he did it with 2 fingers. Under increased gravity. Impossible. And yet, recorded. Verified. Unexplainable. Elias noticed a change immediately. The corridors felt different. Not physically, but socially. Where cadets once passed it without a glance, now they paused. Conversation stopped when he approached. Eyes followed him. Not with hostility, but something more complex. Calculation. Uncertainty. A Varelian cadet who had failed to lift earlier stood near the corridor junction, clearly waiting. When Elias approached, the cadet straightened. Human. Elias Ward. Yeah. Elias replied, slowing slightly. The Varelian tilted their head, all 4 eyes narrowing in focused study. I require clarification. Elias almost smiled. About what? The lift, your method. Elias hesitated. Method? I mean, I just picked it up. That is not sufficient. Okay, well, I braced my stance, kept my back straight, and lifted with my legs. Basic stuff. The Varelian's expression didn't change, but something in their posture tightened. You describe fundamentals as though they are trivial. I thought they were. They are not. A brief silence stretched between them. Elias rubbed the back of his neck. Look, Back on Earth, we train like that all the time. Lifting, resistance, body mechanics. It's kind of normal. Normal. The Varelian repeated softly, as if testing the word. Before Elias could elaborate, the station speakers crackled to life. All cadets, report to Chamber 2 for reevaluation. Immediately, the Varelian's gaze flicked toward the ceiling, then back to Elias. This is because of you. Yeah, Elias admitted. Probably. Chamber 2 was larger, colder, and noticeably more reinforced. The walls were thicker, the floor layered with additional structural plating. This wasn't a standard training room. It was a calibration chamber, which meant one thing. They were taking this seriously. Very seriously. The cadets assembled in tighter formation this time, the casual looseness from earlier gone. Even the Krask stood more rigidly, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the center of the room. The cube was already there, unchanged in appearance. But everything else was different. Above it, the gravity readout blinked. Gravity, 5.2 standard. A collective reaction rippled through the group, subtle but unmistakable. That was no longer a test. That was pressure. Elias felt the moment he stepped inside. His body responded instinctively, muscles tightening, posture adjusting to compensate. Okay, that's heavy. Not impossible, but not casual anymore. Good. That made more sense. Instructor Threx stood at the front, flanked by two additional figures. Academy analysts, their uniforms marked with scientific insignia. This session is a controlled reevaluation, Threx announced. Previous results have been deemed anomalous. A faint pause before that last word. Each cadet will perform under revised conditions. No one asked questions. They didn't need to. The first few attempts were worse than before. The increased gravity crushed momentum. Even the strongest cadets struggled to generate enough force to initiate the lift. Where earlier there had been centimeters of movement, now there were millimeters, if anything. The Krask tried again. This time, they couldn't lift it at all. Not even a fraction. Frustration showed, sharp visible, but they stepped back without protest. Cadet Ward. The name hit differently now, not as a formality, as a variable. Elias exhaled slowly and stepped forward. The weight of attention was heavier than the gravity. He could feel it, expectation pressing in from every direction. This isn't the same anymore. Before it had been a test. Now, it felt like an experiment. On him, he approached the cube, slower this time, more deliberate. The gravity dragged at his limbs, subtle but persistent. His breathing adjusted automatically, deeper, more controlled. He crouched, placed both hands on the cube. No point showing off now. Behind him, silence. Complete. Proceed, Threx said. Elias nodded slightly. Then he lifted. For a split second, nothing. The cube resisted. Hard. His muscles fired, compensating instantly. Legs engaged. Core tightened. Grip adjusted. Then it moved. Slowly. Heavier than before. Noticeably heavier. But still, it rose. Not as cleanly, not as effortlessly, but steadily. Controlled. The cube left the ground. A few centimeters. Then more. Elias exhaled through clenched teeth, stabilizing the weight as it shifted slightly in his hands. Okay, yeah, this is real. He held it there, arms engaged, body locked into alignment. Not easy, but not failing, not even close. Maintain, one of the analysts said sharply. Elias held. Seconds stretched. 5, 10, 15. His arms trembled slightly now, but he didn't drop it, didn't lose control. Finally, set it down. He obeyed, lowering the cube carefully until it touched the floor. The moment it did, the room erupted, not in noise, but in energy, shock, confusion, recalculation. That is beyond projected thresholds. One analyst muttered, "Recheck the gravity field." Said another, "It is accurate. It must not be. It is." Threx remained silent, but his posture had changed. He was no longer observing a cadet. He was studying a problem. Elias straightened, rolling his shoulders slightly. That felt like a workout. Finally, he glanced around. Every cadet was staring at him, not dismissively, not skeptically, but differently. The Varelian from earlier spoke first, voice low. You are affected by the gravity. Elias nodded. Yeah, of course I am. But you are not limited by it. He paused. I mean, I kind of am. No, the Varelian said. Not in the way we are. That landed. Elias frowned slightly. He hadn't thought of it like that. To him, this was just effort. To them, it was something else. Instructor Threx stepped forward at last. Cadet Ward. Elias looked up. Your performance will be analyzed further. Okay? A beat. Then Threx turned to the rest of the group. This session is concluded. But no one moved immediately, because the test hadn't just been reevaluated. It had been redefined, and at the center of it was a species they thought they understood, but clearly didn't. As the cadets slowly began to disperse, one thought lingered in every mind in that room. If this was what a human could do under pressure, what happened when they stopped holding back? The Academy did not tolerate unknowns. Within hours of the second trial, Elias Ward ceased being just a cadet. He became a subject. The science division occupied a separate sector of Station Khepri, quiet, sterile, and meticulously controlled. Where the training chambers were built for strain, this place was built for precision. Elias sat on a reinforced examination platform. Sleeves rolled up, a web of translucent sensors mapped across his arms, chest, and spine. A soft blue light scanned over him in slow passes. Remain still, one of the analysts said, without looking up. I am still, Elias replied. You adjusted your posture by 3 degrees. Sorry. Across the room, multiple displays flickered with data, muscle density readings, neural activity patterns, gravitational response curves. And none of it aligned with expectations. Muscle fiber composition is irregular. One researcher muttered, not irregular. Another corrected, balanced. That is irregular. They both glanced back at Elias. He raised an eyebrow. Good irregular or bad irregular? Neither answered. Behind a transparent observation barrier, several cadets had gathered, unofficially but not discouraged. The Varelian stood closest to glass. Explain, they said quietly to Instructor Threx. What are we observing? Threx did not immediately respond. Inside the lab, one of the scientists adjusted the display, projecting a layered model of Elias's musculature. Most species specialize, the scientist began, speaking loudly enough for both rooms. Strength, speed, endurance, optimize along evolutionary lines. The model shifted. Humans do not. The display highlighted different muscle groups, color-coded. They possess a hybrid distribution. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but capable in all categories simultaneously. Another screen lit up, this one showing neural signals. And more importantly, neural inhibition thresholds. Elias glanced at it. You keep saying that. What does it actually mean? The scientist hesitated, then simplified. Your brain does not fully prevent you from using your strength. Elias frowned. Isn't it supposed to? Yes. Oh. A pause. Wait, are you saying other species can't use all their strength? Correct, the scientist said. Most organisms limit output to prevent structural damage, muscle tearing, bone stress, system failure. And humans don't. They do. Another scientist interjected. But to a lesser degree, under stress, humans can override those limitations. Elias leaned back slightly. So, adrenaline? The scientists exchanged glances. That is an oversimplification, one admitted. Yeah, we call it adrenaline. Behind the glass, the Varelian spoke again. He is inefficient. Threx tilted his head slightly. Explain. He is not optimized, not specialized. His species should be outperformed in all categories. And yet, the Varelian's eyes narrowed. And yet he is not. Stand, one of the scientists instructed. Elias complied, stepping down from the platform. New test parameters, the scientist continued. Not strength, control. That sounded worse. Chamber 3 made the others look simple. The cube remained, but now it hovered slightly above the ground, held in place by a containment field. Its surface flickered faintly, indicating internal recalibration. Mass variance enabled, the scientists announced. Distribution will shift unpredictably during lift. Elias blinked. So it's not just heavy, it's unstable? Correct. Cool, he said flatly. The gravity field engaged. Gravity, 5.2 standard. Same as before. But this wasn't about lifting anymore. It was about handling. The cadets gathered again, though fewer spoke this time. The atmosphere had shifted from curiosity to focus. They weren't watching a test. They were watching a demonstration. Cadet Ward, Threx said. Elias stepped forward. No hesitation now, just awareness. He approached the cube, studying the faint distortions in the containment field. Unpredictable weight shift. So, balance matters more than force. He crouched, both hands ready. Begin. He reached in and gripped the cube. For a fraction of a second, it felt normal. Then, it shifted, violently. The mass redistributed to one side, dragging the cube off-center mid-lift. Elias reacted instantly, adjusting his grip, stepping into the imbalance. Whoa, okay. The cube lurched again, heavier on the opposite edge now. Not random, reactive, testing him. His arms tightened, muscles firing in rapid correction cycles. This wasn't a lift anymore. It was constant adaptation. Every second, the weight changed. Every second, he had to respond. The room watched in silence. This time, there was no illusion of ease. Elias was working. His breathing deepened. His stance widened slightly to maintain stability. His grip shifted again, subtle, precise adjustments to counter the cube's erratic behavior. A sharp tilt. He corrected. Another. He compensated. His arms trembled now, not from lack of strength, but from continuous micro-adjustments. This was exhausting in a different way. Maintain control, the scientist said. Elias almost laughed. I'm trying. The cube dipped suddenly, far heavier than before. For a split second, it nearly slipped. A collective flinch passed through the observers. But Elias caught it. Barely. He tightened his grip, pulled it back into alignment, and stabilized. Seconds passed. Long ones. Then set it down. He lowered it carefully, slower than before, resisting the final destabilizing shifts until it touched the ground. The containment field flickered off. Silence. Again. But this time, it wasn't shock. It was understanding. Not complete, but growing. Elias stepped back, flexing his hand slightly. Okay, he said, exhaling. That one sucked. A few cadets exchanged glances. The Varelian spoke softly. He struggles. Yes, Threx replied, but he succeeds. Threx nodded once. That is the difference. Inside the chamber, one of the scientists turned to the others. It is not his strength, they said quietly. It is his response. Later, as the cadets dispersed, the distance around Elias had changed again. It wasn't caution anymore. It wasn't confusion. It was respect. Not because he made it look easy, but because he didn't, and did it anyway. The changes began the next cycle. No announcement, no ceremony, just different instructions. The cadets assembled once more in the primary training chamber, but something was immediately off. The gravity was lower. Gravity, 2.8 standard. A murmur spread through the group. Reduced? One cadet whispered. That is easier, another said. Instructor Threx stood at the center, motionless as ever, but the tension in the room had shifted. This is not a regression, Threx said, cutting through the uncertainty. It is a recalibration. The word carried weight. Previous evaluations prioritized maximum output, he continued. This approach is incomplete. A brief pause. We will now train for sustained performance under variable stress. Several cadets glanced, almost instinctively, toward Elias. He noticed, didn't comment. The cube remained. Of course it did. But now it wasn't alone. Additional equipment had been brought in. Resistance bands, variable mass modules, stabilization rigs. Tools designed not for single feats of strength, but for repetition, endurance, adaptation. The Varelian tilted their head. This resembles progressive loading. Elias blinked. Yeah, That's literally what it's called. The Varelian looked at him. Of course it is. Cadets, Threx said, you will not attempt to lift the core weight immediately. That alone was enough to disrupt expectations. Instead, you will prepare for it. A Krask frowned. Preparation is inefficient. Direct attempt yields measurable results. And yet, Threx replied, your measurable results were insufficient. Silence. No argument followed. Training began, not with the cube, but with movement, controlled lifts, repeated efforts, timed holds. At first, the cadets resisted the approach, not openly, but in posture, in hesitation. They were used to proving capability in singular moments, not building it gradually. Elias recognized it instantly. This was normal to him. To them, it was foreign. The Varelian attempted a resistance sequence and faltered midway, limbs trembling. This is inefficient, they muttered. It's supposed to be hard, Elias said from nearby, adjusting a weighted module. That does not make it effective. It kind of does, he replied. You're forcing your body to adapt. My body is already optimized. Elias glanced at them. Then why couldn't you lift the cube? The Varelian paused. Long enough to matter. Days passed. Then more. Something shifted, not dramatically, but steadily. The Krask held longer under load. The Varelian stabilized faster during imbalanced drills. Even the lighter frame cadets began generating measurable improvements, not explosive but consistent. The chamber sounded different now. Less impact, more effort, breathing, movement, repetition, work. Elias found himself integrated, not as an exception, but as a reference. Your stance, the Varelian said one session, observing him. It changes before the load shifts. Yeah, Elias replied. You kind of feel it coming. That is not logical. It's not conscious, he said. It's just practice. The Varelian tried to replicate it. Failed. Tried again. Improved. That became the pattern. Eventually, the cube returned to focus. Today, Threx announced, you will attempt to lift again. No dramatic build-up. No raised gravity. Just the same object. Waiting. But the room was different now. The cadet stepped forward, not with tension, but with intent. The first attempt. Better. Not successful, but better. The cube shifted more noticeably. The second. A lift. Brief. Unstable. But real. No one celebrated. They reset. Tried again. The Varelian stepped forward. Elias watched closely. They positioned themselves differently this time. Stance adjusted, limbs aligned more efficiently. They lifted. The cube rose. Not high, not long, but undeniably off the ground. They held it, just for a moment, then set it down controlled. No collapse, no failure, just completion. The Varelian stepped back, breathing uneven but steady. Their eyes met Elias's. This is progress. Elias grinned. Yeah, it is. Even the Krask improved. Less brute force. More control. Still aggressive. But directed now. The cube lifted higher than before. Stayed up longer. Came down safely. Finally, Cadet Ward. Elias stepped forward. It felt different now. Not pressure. Not expectation. Just another attempt. He approached the cube, rolled his shoulders once, and set his stance. Familiar, but not identical, because now he wasn't proving anything. He lifted, clean, controlled, efficient, still strong, but no longer the outlier. Just better at the same system everyone else was now learning. He held it briefly, then set it down. No reaction, no shock, just acknowledgement. Instructor Threx stepped forward. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, strength, he began, is not defined by origin. The cadet stood still. Not by form. A glance across the group. Not by expectation. His gaze settled briefly on Elias. It is defined by response. Silence. Then, the human did not surpass this trial. A pause. He revealed its limitations. That landed, deeply, because it wasn't about Elias anymore. It was about what they had all been missing. The cube remained at the center of the chamber, heavier than ever, not physically, but symbolically. And this time, no one hesitated to step forward, not because they knew they would succeed, but because now they understood how to try. At the back of the room, Elias leaned slightly against the wall, arms crossed, watching, not as the strongest, not as the anomaly, but as the beginning of a change. And for the first time since arriving at Khepri, he wasn't the one being measured. He was the one who had shifted the scale.